Calling Us Home is about hope and love and home.
Home to me is not one location.
Community and camaraderie amongst people.
The storyline is real and relevant to so many societies.
The story of Calling Us Home centers around a young woman, Grace, who has to flee her country in Africa because of war. She is sent to America, and there she has to experience what a lot of the immigrant population does, which is an estrangement to people around her, the unfamiliar, some hostility. And through those experiences, we follow Grace as she finds her own identity, her own self-expression, new relationships, love, opportunity.
And the question that we keep asking is, will she find home? Will home be a person? Will home be a place? Will home be a state of being? What will be a meaningful home, not just for Grace, but for all the people that she meets and that she interacts with? This is a very real question for many, many people.
Some of the themes we've been exploring in Calling Us Home center around community and family. What are the communities into which we are thrust, and what are the communities that we choose? And I find that very relevant right now, especially where I come from. We have a lot of people coming into the country that are seeking a new sense of identity and seeking a new community and looking for a better life for their family. So I think it's a very personal story that is told on a very grand scale, because the experiences people are having are once in a lifetime. They are life-changing. But because they are life-changing for individual characters in the play, each story becomes very poignant and very personal in how we present it. What appealed to me about Calling Us Home and the story that Alice is telling, one, that it's a woman in the center of the story as our protagonist, and that she is a smart woman, an educated woman. It's a woman of color, and those are stories we don't always see. And then also that predominantly the entire cast is a cultural mix of different global experiences, from the Latino community in South America, some of the Eastern European experience, the African experience, not just in South Africa, but in other countries as well. It opened the lens on so many different experiences under one story. It was really impressive to me. The pre-production process was massive and thorough and challenging because it was all virtual. It was all online because of the pandemic and because of how far away we were from each other. So for a little over a year and a half, Alice and I would meet and we would talk about, is this the moment that is most resonant? Is this playing the clearest? Is this what you're intending as the playwright? Is this what you're intending as the composer, as far as the emotion that is trying to be awakened in this moment?
We wanted to assemble a team that would be able to bring themselves and their own sense of identity, their own understanding of how this story unfolds, so that we could truly collaborate.
Our design team is from the States, from South Africa, and Taiwan. So there were production meetings that we would have online that spanned a 12-hour time difference. And then finally we all arrived here, which was a really stunningly moving moment that really, again, spoke to the human connection that we are trying to illuminate in Alice's story, of how much do we need to be with each other.
I, and my sister Grace.
The entire rehearsal experience was a very moving experience because some people hadn't done a live performance since before COVID. So that was 2 or 3 years for some of the performers and for some of the designers as well. And so every time we engaged, whether it was sonically with music or visually with blocking or tangibly holding each other or shaking hands, it was another depth of connecting that none of us expected to be so impactful and so life-changing in a literal sense of that phrase. And so the community on stage got very close because we were the first community that we found coming out of this monumental global crisis.
But I want it faster. That is the moment.
Even more than usual for me, I am there to support and guide and facilitate a safe, confident space in which actors can make choices and follow impulses and find discoveries within the play.
They are a young, fresh, super talented bunch. They have felt the story, lived the story. They have brought their own experiences. They have wholeheartedly and generously lent into every moment of the story, and every character that they portray they have pulled them into their bodies and into their sense of self.
There's just a fundamental groundwork of South African artistry and African perspective that is going to be a very rare, very special experience for audience to have in Europe and in the States, because that lens is frankly underrepresented and now represented very well. It's still in a narrative and in a musical form that I recognize as a musical, but it's very different because the sounds are different, the choreography is different, the self-expression is different because the South African theater community has brought their own living experience of their life to the story.
I think when you build a musical, a grand scale musical at the tip of Africa, it's going to be different. There's an openness, there's an authenticity that comes from a cast that has dealt with many of the issues that we are talking about in this piece at the sharp end. For them, migration and displacement, these are very real, personal experiences for them, their parents, and their communities. That has a magic to it. That has a specialness. There are sparkles in the air. There are trails of stars through the theatre.
The music is just exquisite. It's beautiful. As the sound designer, I've been working hand in hand with the build-up of the music, building up of the score. And if I can only get a percentage of that across in the manner that is needed and wanted for this, I know I've cracked it for Alice and her beautiful work.
Writing the music for Calling Us Home has been a hard process. I wanted to write a classical musical, so I wanted to enjoy the epic grandeur of a big score, of a big cast, of many voices. And I felt that some of the emotions in this story are big emotions, and so they deserved the respect of a seriously sized space. I write in many parts with the voices. I have 26 voices on stage, and I'm going to love and enjoy using every single one of their beautiful voices. There are shades, there are leanings that I've tried to weave together to create a landscape which is both respectful but also very, very diverse. And so that the different musical influences will create the tapestry of these many, many different perspectives. We did not want a stylized dance musical. We wanted to have different bodies on stage. We wanted to be very representative. We wanted to be very diverse. And so we needed to find a movement language for the show that was very intrinsic and very natural. And Celeste Buerta has done a superb job in crafting that for us.
I love the way she moves. And then I also love how she adapts what she would call choreography into elaborate human behavior for everyone in our cast. Everyone from a very experienced dancer to someone who is basically an actor who moves. She really does find a way to take physical movement and have it mean something emotional, or have it stand in for this critical event that is occurring to people.
For me, when we spoke about the movement, and I explained to Peter that I would try and get them to move from a place that is from life experience, and also having the movement come from the center of the body as opposed to the extremities, the legs and the arms, and have everything being driven from the center, the emotion, the feeling of what's happening in the scene at the time.
And for me, it's been breathtaking to watch that, because it's not what I expected. And when she and I spoke through the story for several months before we got going, she helped me shift the lens of, I think this is a larger moment. I think this is a more intimate moment. I think this is a more personal moment.
We are homeland.
soulless strong by defiance, paying for our father's penance. Seared by years of grievancing, the furnace of our anger. We are hard men to break, resentful in our defeat. We're hard men to break, barely paid enough to eat.
The conversations I had with Alan Edwards, our lighting designer, with whom I've worked in the States, and Pei Li, our costume designer from Taiwan, who I also had the great fortune to work with in the States, those conversations started very simply of, here's the story that's on the page. Here's how I believe Alice is telling it, which is both intimate and grand, right? It has a sweeping score that is akin to Les Miserables or Phantom of the Opera, but it's got a very personal, very intimate story. With Pei, I spoke very simply about who are these people and where do they come from and what influences do their cultures have on how they wear their clothes, what kind of clothes they wear, and where do those cultural influences that are specific to one character start to blend into other characters. Another great attribute of Alice's play is that she names all of her characters. There isn't an ensemble 1, ensemble 2, ensemble 3. Every single character has a name and a voice part and where they come from. And so Pei went off on her own and came back with these beautiful, individual, singular designs for every single character in the show and their trajectory through the show. And it was really, really helpful to me as a director to see how Pei was seeing the show. I'll say to a design team at the beginning of our process, I know where we're going, but I need you to take me the scenic route there.
I enjoy being more of a costume dramaturg than a costume designer. It's more about understanding who these characters are and why they wear what, as opposed to what they're wearing. You know, it's more about the why. When I read the libretto, I always felt that they need to have something that symbolizes home, that Grace takes with her everywhere. So I had this idea where I found a print that's from Africa, and then I added this character, there's a Chinese character that symbolizes home. It still works in the African print fabric, and it also adds a bit of who I am as a designer, and also just a bit of all these different cultures in this little thing. And I thought a shawl is great because it belongs to her brother, goes to the mother gives to Grace, and she takes it all throughout her journey. She's always carrying a piece of her heart on her, physically wearing it.
For 3 nights the girl waited by the fire. For 3 days she watched for him and didn't tire. She watched for her lover's return. She watched until her eyes began to burn.
One of the things I love about Alan's work as a lighting designer is that he's a painter with light. So we know exactly what we're supposed to be watching on stage. We know whom we're supposed to be following, but he's going to do that in a very artful, theatrical, dramatic, stunning way.
A lot of my job is information distribution. The what, and then get it to the people that will make it happen. And so it's not until we get to, the first run through in the theater, full out, that we might be at the editing stage. That's where the work is, once we see it standing up.
I hope you are all well this afternoon and had a good morning. We had a productive morning here. I was working with Alan on lights, so we're good. We're going to pick up with Angie's threat, as it is known, and then we'll go into the lights. And then if that works, we'll go right into a new piece of underscore. And then we're back. Beautiful. That sort of makes sense? Yeah. Great.
We wear multiple hats. We're the cameraman along with the director. We're the cinematographer. We are sometimes part editor, because the stage is always full frame. The audience has the freedom to look wherever they want to look. And so we have to tell them or help them look where they're supposed to look.
Spread my wings and fly with the sun. Time is done and my new life begun. I will spread my wings and fly with the sun. Far away from here. This ain't Broadway and ain't a play. We got your first note, muscle in this ain't Broadway. Do it our way.
Now we present a version of the show that we feel we can take to different audiences around the world. So for us, this is now the culmination of our development process, our workshopping process. We now feel that the heart of the show is beating in the correct way.
I hope audiences coming to see Calling Us Home walk away with two things: a reawakened excitement for the theatrical experience. And the second thing I hope audiences seeing Calling Us Home walk away with is either a new or a rediscovered and deeper sense of compassion for each other. To walk out of the theater and look at the street around them and think what Alice has one of the characters say, which is, everyone here is from someplace else, but we all share the same heartbeat.